Hey y'all, how's it going? If you haven't seen my short that I made the other day, or short on founding father stories, I'd mentioned that I wouldn't be doing any more reaction videos on that channel for a while because my computer, unfortunately, here is acting very strange, and I'm now at the point where I'm truly convinced that it's probably dying. I mean, it's a 3 or 4 year old computer. So I'm going to go to Best Buy tomorrow, have them take a look at it, diagnostic, see what the problem is, and then go from there. But I also have a week and a half left of this semester, and I really need to get school done so I can graduate. So I'm gonna put off the computer priority until after graduation, and then figure out what to do on this run. So I won't be doing those for a while. I will still be making shorts from my phone, which is where I'm making this video from right now. Um, on an unrelated topic, I just wanted to talk about my thoughts. Well, not my thoughts, my reasoning why I only stick to American Revolution slash founding era stuff, or the time period. So if you haven't seen my first ever stream on founding father stories, which I don't think got a lot of views or any of that stuff, I did a stream a while back where I mentioned why I got away from the Civil War era as like my second favorite historical era in American history, and the reasoning for that, and it's because of the lost cause propaganda. And because movies like Gone with the Wind and Gods and Generals and how they're portrayed and how those films portrayed the Civil War era ruined it for me. And the other reason being that the Revolution has always been my number one favorite historical time period. And this leads me this leads me to also saying that I listened to a podcast today on the way to running errands and those sorts of things. I'm moving boxes and stuff because I have to be out of here by the last day of this month, which is this Friday, if you can believe it. But um, it was these two British podcasters that I listened to, and they offered their thoughts on the movie The Patriot. And I thought that their perspective was interesting because you don't really hear, unless you're someone who's in England, or unless you're an American who reads all perspectives on how audiences felt about the movie The Patriot, you don't really get a sense of the British feeling of the movie because of the heavy controversy that it's somehow anti-British. British bad guys, Continentals or Americans, the good guys. Um, so that was interesting, and it also reminded me too that just talking about the revolution and talking about the founding era from whatever perspective, loyalist, patriot, Native American, African American, women, immigrants, etc., etc., it's more historically, at least from my experience, it's more historically rewarding and sane and grounded to talk about that, because you get you can at least understand all these perspectives without coming up with some dumb, ridiculous conspiracy theory, the way that you do for the Civil War now, unfortunately, or for World War II and things like the Holocaust. And so that leads me to my next point I want to make, which is that I watched a reaction video of Vlogging Through History, who I subscribe to on YouTube and I follow on Instagram. Some of you guys who subscribe to me may be familiar with who he is. He did initially vlogging back in the day, and then post-COVID, or during COVID and after COVID, he turned to reaction videos. But I just watched his reaction video to Matt Walsh's Real History of the Civil War, and there are some things that I agreed with the person in question that he was reacting to. especially mostly on the military strategy of like the Civil War and like the Battle of Chancellorsville. Um, but the stuff after, like him insinuating, not logging through history, Matt Walsh, him insinuating that all the founding fathers believed that states could have the right to leave the union whenever they wanted to, it didn't seem to hold up for me, because that ignores the fact that the founders were not a monolith, right? There were some founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and especially George Mason and Patrick Henry, who favored state sovereignty and the Articles of Confederation over the new Constitution. There are people like Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, who favored the new Constitution and a strong, powerful central government. But to say that all the founding fathers believed in the same theory about the legality of secession, it ignores their disagreements, right? Ignores the fact that there were tons of disagreements during the Constitutional Convention. So I don't know where Matt Walsh got that idea from or that claim from, but that is not historically accurate. And then there are some in the comment sections who, not surprisingly, sadly, continue to insist that the Confederates were not fighting for slavery, and that anyone who insists otherwise or somehow taught like propaganda education system type level propaganda, and that the people insisting that the Civil War was anything other than slavery, we're the truth tellers here and you guys are just being lied to all these years. And it's like, okay, there were probably multiple motivators on why an individual fought in that conflict, but the Confederate government leaders, they all said blatantly that we're seceding over slavery, and that the Union considered that treason. And then I came across another comment that said that, well, the founding fathers, the 13 colonies, were seceding from a central government, and that they too were basically committed treason. And I replied to him and I told him that all may be true, but that there's also different contexts and different reasons why the Declaration of Independence was adopted in 1776 and why secession happened in 1861. The colonies did not say to King George that we're breaking away because we want to keep slavery, even though that slavery was a central role in the Revolution, right? I'm not saying we need to ignore slavery's part in the Revolution to also acknowledge that slavery was not the cause of why independence happened, right? Now, if you're someone from the British point of view, you could absolutely make the argument that the colonies were rebelling against a legitimate authority and therefore committing treason. But again, there's the difference that one war for independence or one struggle for independence was successful, and that they were fighting over things like issues like taxation without representation, limited westward expansion, the rights of Englishmen, British troops being quartered into colonial homes, right? The Confederacy in the Civil War was fighting over slavery. What they disguised as states' rights, quote unquote, was actually the states' rights to keep owning other human beings, right? Because if they were legit fighting for actual honest states' rights, then they would not have tried to interfere in the North's attempts to preserve their states' rights when they didn't want to go aboard with the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, which was just as extreme and more notorious than the ancestor that was signed into law in 1793 by George Washington. So yeah, all those reasons, all those claims that, the Confederacy, they didn't actually mean it like this, and those was like, come on, guys. I have many problems with the education system in our country, But to insinuate that you guys are the only truth tellers and that anyone who disagrees with you are like fools or somehow, you know, unintelligent or they deserve to be name called, like, come on guys, stop. Like, we can do better. But just from my own personal experience, and this may be different for a lot of you guys. You may have different historical interests. Someone may be interested in Reconstruction, and that's like the one era that they're most intellectually sane and mentally sane, being able to talk about and present and sound like they know what they're talking about, right? For me, it's the Revolution and the founding era. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I know everything that happened in that time period, because we're still learning every day new information and new evidence that comes to light. So, but, and here's another thing too: people grow and change as they get older. Back then I was in such a huge Civil War phase that I wouldn't read anything else aside from the Revolution, or that I wouldn't read anything else other than like maybe the Revolutionary era. Like, I would just read Civil War literature, or I would read like Texas' role in the Civil War, because that's where I currently reside, in Texas, right? But in the same breath, I grew to despise Gone with the Wind and Gods and Generals. And I read Gods and Generals, the book, and I actually liked the book, and I liked the author who wrote it, right? The first time I saw the movie, I was like, I was all in. I thought it was a good movie. I thought there was no issue in terms of propaganda. But then I go to the movie reviews, and then like 3 years pass, 3 or 4 years pass, 5 years, because I first saw it in 2021, and I have a completely different perspective on it now. I think now it's definitely one of those things I'm never going to watch ever again, right? Same with Gone with the Wind. And I don't know if I'll read the book Gone with the Wind. I don't know how similar or different the book is from the movie, and I probably won't watch Gettysburg either, because it's like a 4-hour movie. I don't know if it's like extended version, extended director's cut, or the original version, but like somebody told me that it was a long movie, and I have no plans to watch a 4-hour movie again, probably in my life. But that also makes me a contradiction, because I also simultaneously enjoy long movies like Barry Lyndon, which takes place in the 18th century in that same historical era as the Revolutionary War, but focusing on an Irishman who first lives in Ireland and then eventually settles in England, and then he has to go back to Ireland. But yeah, the point of this video that I wanted to say overall is that it's okay to specialize in only one historical era. It's okay to allow yourself the boundary of not wanting to get dragged into other into other conversations about like other historical eras. And I'm not saying that the other eras are less important than the Revolution, but I've noticed in my personal experience, in conversations with others who also share a similar historical interest to me, the conversations are not heated, right? They're not as heated as much as the Civil War or World War II or like the Holocaust. It's just, I mean, it's sad, because, we should be able to talk about all these eras without anyone making any excuse whatsoever to come up with conspiracy theories. So that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching.